"Are you sure you know how to handle that thing, old-timer?" The voice, sharp and laced with condescension, cut through the rhythmic crackle of distant gunfire. Major Caldwell, USMC, stood with his hands on his hips, his perfectly pressed digital camouflage uniform a stark contrast to the dusty, sun-baked environment of the public shooting range. He was a man carved from granite and ambition, his jaw set, his eyes hidden behind a pair of reflective tactical sunglasses. At his side, two younger Marines, barely out of their teens, shifted their weight, trying to emulate his confident, imposing posture. The object of his scorn, an elderly man named Norman George, did not look up. He sat on a simple wooden stool, his back ramrod straight despite his 80-plus years. Spread before him on a worn canvas cloth was the disassembled form of an M40 sniper rifle. Its wooden stock was dark with age and oil, scarred with the nicks and gouges of a long and storied life. Norman's hands, though wrinkled and liver-spotted, moved with a surgeon's precision. He slid a clean patch through the barrel, his movements economical, practiced, a ritual performed thousands of times. He was a portrait of serene focus, a rock in the stream of the Major's arrogance. "I asked you a question, Pops," Caldwell pressed, taking a step closer. The gravel crunched under his immaculate combat boots. "This is a live fire range. We have regulations. That relic looks like it belongs in a museum, not out here. I need to see your range permit and your identification." Norman finished his task, carefully placing the cleaning rod down. Only then did he slowly lift his head. His eyes, a pale and piercing blue, held a clarity that seemed to defy his age. They were calm, observant, and utterly unfazed. He looked at the Major, then at the two young Marines flanking him, and offered no reply. This quiet defiance seemed to stoke the Major's irritation into a hotter flame. The young officer saw an obstinate old man, perhaps a little senile, who was failing to show the proper respect for his rank and presence. He couldn't see the deep, quiet waters of experience that lay behind those eyes. "All right, that's it," Caldwell snapped, his voice rising in volume. Shooters at the neighboring lanes began to pause, lowering their weapons to glance over. A small audience was gathering. "I'm the senior officer present, and I'm declaring this lane unsafe. Stand up, hand me the weapon, and give me your ID. Now." The confrontation hung in the hot, still air, thick with the scent of gunpowder and dry earth. Norman George remained seated, his hand resting gently on the cool, worn wood of his rifle's stock. He had not come here for a fight, but it seemed a fight had come for him. Major Caldwell felt a surge of righteous authority. The old man's silence was insubordination. He saw a stolen valor case in the making, some deluded civilian playing soldier with a surplus rifle and a faded jacket. The jacket itself was an offense, an old red field coat, the kind you'd find in a dusty surplus store. It was clean but frayed at the cuffs, the fabric softened from 1,000 washings. It was the antithesis of Caldwell's own crisp modern uniform, which boasted sharp creases and perfectly placed rank insignia. "Do you hear me?" Caldwell's voice boomed across the range, silencing the last few rounds of popping gunfire. Everyone was watching now. A man in a red polo shirt a few lanes down slowly lowered his phone, its camera lens aimed in their direction. "I am giving you a direct order. Stand up. Place the weapon on the bench. Show me your identification." Norman finally moved, but not in the way the Major demanded. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and retrieved a battered leather wallet. It was held together by a thick rubber band. He didn't stand. He didn't rush. He simply opened the wallet and began to thumb through its contents, his actions methodical, as if he had all the time in the world. This infuriated Caldwell. It felt like a game, a deliberate attempt to undermine his authority in front of his men and the public. "Are you deaf? Or just stupid?" The order was to stand up. He took another step forward, his shadow falling over Norman and the disassembled rifle. One of the young Marines shifted nervously, his eyes darting between the Major and the unmoving old man. This was escalating beyond a simple range check. "No need for all this," Norman said, his voice quiet but clear, a low rumble that carried easily in the sudden silence. "Just here to shoot." He pulled a laminated card from his wallet, his range membership, and placed it on the bench. Then he produced his state driver's license. Norman P. George, age 83. Caldwell snatched the cards up, glancing at them with a dismissive sneer. "This doesn't prove anything. Anyone can get one of these. What's your story? You think putting on that old jacket makes you a hero?" He gestured disdainfully at Norman's M65. His eyes narrowed, focusing on a small, faded patch sewn onto the left sleeve. It was a simple design, its colors bleached by the sun and time, its threads worn thin. "What's this supposed to be? Some kind of fantasy league?" As the major's finger jabbed mockingly toward the patch, the world seemed to tilt for Norman. The bright, harsh sunlight of the California shooting range dissolved into a suffocating triple canopy green. The pop, pop, pop of .22 caliber pistols became the terrifying guttural chatter of an AK-47. The smell of gunpowder was replaced by the thick metallic scent of blood and the earthy rot of the jungle floor. For a fleeting second, he felt the familiar weight of his full gear, the slickness of mud trying to steal his boots, and saw the face of a young corporal, his eyes wide with fear, handing him that very same patch, new and vibrant, just hours before an ambush in the Ashau Valley. The memory was a ghost, there and gone in a heartbeat, leaving behind only the dull ache of a past that never truly left him. He blinked, the shooting range swimming back into focus. Major Caldwell was still talking, his voice a droning annoyance. "You people are all the same," the major continued, warming to his theme, playing to the crowd he imagined was on his side. "You watch a few war movies, buy some surplus junk, and think you can come out here and play soldier. You're a danger to yourself and everyone else. You probably don't even know the 4 safety rules." A man named Dave, standing 2 lanes over, had seen enough. He was an off-duty Army Ranger, a staff sergeant who'd spent the morning sighting in a new scope. He was younger than Caldwell, but he'd seen more of the real thing. He recognized the look in Norman's eyes. It was a look he'd seen in his own platoon sergeants, a weary patience that came from enduring things men like Caldwell only read about in reports. And he recognized the condescending bravado of an officer whose ego far outstripped his experience. Caldwell went a step too far. He reached down, his hand closing around the stock of Norman's rifle. "I'm confiscating this until the local authorities arrive. We'll have them determine if you're competent to be on this range. In fact, I'm going to recommend a full mental evaluation." That was it. That was the line. Disrespect was one thing. Public humiliation and the threat of institutionalizing a veteran was another. Dave turned away, pulling his phone from his pocket. He kept his back to the scene, pretending to check a message. He had a number for a chief warrant officer at the provost marshal's office on the nearby Marine Corps base. A crusty, knowledgeable man who was the unofficial fixer for any and all problems. He dialed. "Chief Miller, it's Sergeant Evans," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Sorry to bother you on a Saturday, but we've got a situation down at the public range off Highway 78. He quickly laid it out. A Marine Major, Caldwell, was harassing an old man, accusing him of stolen valor, threatening to have him arrested. "The Major is way out of line, Chief. The old guy is just trying to mind his own business. What's the old-timer's name?" Miller's voice was gravelly, bored. "George," Dave said, glancing at the driver's license still on the bench. "Norman George." He paused, then added the detail that felt most important. "Chief, the patch on his jacket, it's old, but I think it might be an early force recon patch. Something's not right here. Caldwell is about to physically remove him." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then Chief Miller's voice changed completely. The boredom was gone, replaced by a sharp electric urgency. "Say that name again, Sergeant." "Norman George," Dave repeated. "Stay where you are, Evans. Do not engage. Do not let that major leave with him. I'm handling it." The line went dead. Dave slid the phone back into his pocket, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he had just set in motion, but he knew the cavalry was on its way. Inside the sterile, air-conditioned confines of the base provost marshal's office, Chief Warrant Officer Miller stood bolt upright, the phone still in his hand. He turned to his superior, a lieutenant colonel who was reviewing weekend duty rosters. "Sir, you need to hear this." Miller's voice was tight. "Sergeant Evans is at the civilian range off the 78. He's reporting a Major Caldwell publicly harassing a civilian, an elderly man." The lieutenant colonel looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "And tell Caldwell to knock it off." "Sir," Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. "The civilian's name is Norman George." The name struck the lieutenant colonel like a physical blow. The pen in his hand clattered onto the desk. His face went pale, a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. For a moment he was speechless. He stared at Miller, his mind racing, connecting a name he had only ever heard spoken in hushed, reverent tones with the image of an old man being harassed at a public gun range. "Get me his file," the colonel finally choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Now." Miller was already typing furiously at his computer. A second later, a file appeared on the screen. It was almost entirely black, covered in digital redactions, but the words that were visible were enough. "Classified, top secret, eyes only," and under a list of commendations, Distinguished Service Cross, OLC, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart, X5, Unit Affiliation, 1st Force Reconnaissance Company, Special Projects Group, MAC-VSOG. The official records were a ghost, but the legend was known to every senior Marine who had studied the history of their craft. Norman George was not just a veteran, he was a founding father of modern Marine Corps special operations. The lieutenant colonel grabbed his desk phone, his hand trembling slightly. "Get me the base commander. I don't care if he's on the golf course or in the shower. Get him on this line right now." He looked at Miller, his eyes wide with urgency. "And you, get a security detail. 2 vehicles, MPs, lights and sirens. I want you at that range 5 minutes ago. You treat this like a 4-star general is under threat. Go." Back at the range, Major Caldwell was basking in his perceived victory. He had cornered the old man, exposed him as a fraud, and was now exerting his full authority. He saw the crowd's silent stares not as disapproval, but as confirmation of his power. He felt strong, decisive, a leader taking control of a messy situation. "All right, Grandpa, show's over," he said with a final, arrogant flourish. He reached out and placed a firm hand on Norman's shoulder, preparing to pull him to his feet. "You're coming with me. We're going to have a little chat down at the station, and then maybe we can find a nice quiet room for you where you can't hurt anyone." It was the ultimate overreach, the final unforgivable insult. He wasn't just questioning Norman's honor, he was stripping him of his dignity and his freedom. Norman didn't flinch or resist. He simply looked up at Caldwell, and for the first time, a flicker of profound disappointment clouded his calm blue eyes. It was the look of a man who had seen the very best and the very worst that men could be, and was saddened to find the latter standing before him, wearing a uniform he held sacred. That was when the first siren became audible. It started as a faint, distant wail, easily dismissed as a passing ambulance on the highway. But it didn't pass. It grew louder, closer, splitting into 2, then 3 distinct sirens, all converging on their location at incredible speed. Heads turned, the crowd